Imagine that you're living in 1912 and you've just heard some horrific news. Last night, the largest ocean liner in history, the Titanic, collided with an iceberg and sank, leading to the death of nearly 2,000 people. It's shocking. It shocks you, it shocks your family, everyone in the whole country is blown away and mourns this tragedy. The newspaper posts gruesome witness accounts of children freezing dead in the water and men and women jumping from the elevator rear of the boat to certain death. In just a day, the whole thing becomes a shared cultural experience of grief. And then, about 30 days later, a film about the recent disaster is announced. How would you feel about it? Would you feel that it's appropriate to better understand the story of so many who died that day? Or would you feel outraged because the producers capitalized the disaster by making a movie with a possible huge score? Hello YouTube, welcome to Film Theory. Today we will talk about the much hated at the time 1912 Titanic, an American silent short film starring Dorothy Gibson, an American film actress who survived the sinking of the RMS Titanic on April 15, 1912. Premiering in the United States just 31 days after the event, it was the earliest dramatization of the tragedy. With the public's interest in the tragedy at its peak, even more so than today, you can imagine what was going through the minds of the higher-ups at the Eclair Motion Picture Company. They had already released an incredibly successful newsreel on the Titanic, and now here they were with a popular actress under contract who had survived that very disaster. The temptation was obviously far too great, and thus, Saved from the Titanic was launched, pardon the mild pun. Gibson signed up to make the film only a few days after exiting the lifeboat, doubtless with some misgivings. The persuasive power of Eclair producer Jules Brulator, with whom Gibson was having an affair, may have had something to do with it. She was given credit as his co-writer, although this might simply mean that the filmmakers incorporated her memories in the story with her cooperation. It was filmed in Fort Lee, New York, and partially on an empty ship in the New York harbor. Gibson, obviously still traumatized, reportedly burst into tears several times during takes. The film, which was completed in a week, ran about 10 minutes long, which was standard for early 1910s movies. While incorporating the literally weeks-old Titanic disaster into a fictional story about military duty seems rather gauche today, it helps to know that it wasn't uncommon for recent tragedies to show up in films at the time. In 1913, only 2 weeks after his studio burned to the ground, Tannhauser soberly released a reenactment titled When the Studio Burned. Saved from the Titanic also had a special boost of being the first to have an eyewitness as a star, adding to the film's credibility. Of course, the way it was rushed into distribution obviously points to Eclair's desire to capitalize on the shipwreck. It was also released internationally, and there were some positive reviews. The Moving Picture News kindly called it a very pretty story, and because of the nationwide interest in Miss Gibson, whose rare beauty is seen as more to advantage than ever, this film will be a sensation, and Moving Picture World even thought a surprising and artistically perfect reel has resulted. Others didn't hesitate to point out the inherent poor taste of the film, debuting before the grass had time to grow over the victims' graves. The New York Dramatic Mirror didn't hold back at all. The bare idea of undertaking to reproduce in a studio, no matter how well equipped, or by reenacting sea scenes an event of the appalling character of the Titanic disaster with 1,600 victims, is revolting, especially at a time when the horrors of the event are so fresh in mind. And the young woman who came so lately with her good mother, safely through the distressing scenes, can now bring herself to commercialize her good fortune by the grace of God, is past understanding. Despite all of this, the first movie about the Titanic tragedy remains an important cinematic creation, which I am sure inspired by future production, especially the personal life character of the movie that can be saw even in James Cameron's Titanic, made almost 90 years later. And this is where my theory, that is, just us, comes into play. During the period in which the film was made, in civilized countries such as Great Britain and France, which had a predominantly male elite, women's emancipation movements broke out, such as that of the suffragettes. That is exactly why this film is so important, because the main character is a woman who is rescued from the Titanic. And what other woman was saved, this time fictional and part of a Hollywood production? Rose, of course, a fictional female character fighting for her own freedom and survival on the same ship, in the same time period. So it can only be about the same character told from two different perspectives and told almost 90 years apart, but who convey the same values and go through the same dangers. However, it can also be a coincidence. We have no way of knowing if James Cameron knows about his pioneer film and about its actions and development. However, I still hope that the legacy left by this film can be understood, from the way a tragedy is presented and understood by the public from the perspective of those who lived in those times, as well as the feminist role that inspired over generations. But remember, that's just a theory, a film theory. Thanks for watching.